Imagine a world, just for a second, where you could buy a really beautiful, spacious home for, say, around $400,000.
Okay, I'm listening. That sounds pretty good.
Right, like a place with a big yard, great local schools, actual room to breathe. But here's the kicker. In this reality, you also get to keep your incredibly high-paying Silicon Valley tech job.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the coastal salary stays, but the insane cost of living just vanishes.
Exactly. And naturally, I know what you're thinking. You're waiting for the catch. You're assuming this requires some kind of, soul-crushing, bumper-to-bumper, 3-hour commute each way down Interstate 5.
Yeah, just bleeding away your entire life in traffic.
Right. But that catch actually doesn't exist in this scenario. You pull this off because the solution to California's absolute worst, most agonizing economic crisis isn't found in endless zoning board meetings or obscure tax code revisions.
Right.
It's found in a massive 220-mile-per-hour steel lifeline.
I mean, it sounds borderline utopian when you frame it against the deeply cynical reality of modern California real estate.
It really does.
But it isn't magic. It's just a cold, hard math equation based on infrastructure and geography. When you fundamentally alter the time it takes to cross a distance, you basically rewrite the economic destiny of the land itself.
And that intersection, of infrastructure and human destiny is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a wild ride.
It really is. So our mission today is to look at a highly provocative, incredibly detailed thesis. It was published in April of 2026 on the blog Barack Face.
Yeah, by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right, Bhagat, who, by the way, notes he was actually Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Which is an interesting little piece of trivia.
Yeah. And the piece is titled, China's High-Speed Rail Edge, Why California's Bullet Train Could Have Unlocked a Housing Revolution.
It's just a phenomenal piece of analysis. Bhagat takes something we reflexively categorize as a transportation issue, laying track and moving trains, and he completely reframes it.
Totally.
He forces us to look at concrete viaducts, steel rails, and ticketing systems as the fundamental building blocks of regional economics and, really, housing markets.
Now, before we get into the weeds of the engineering and the economics, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room here.
Yeah, definitely.
The source material we are diving into pitches a genuinely radical idea. Bhagat basically suggests that California should abandon its current paralyzed high-speed rail construction strategy and just hand the actual building of the project over to Chinese state builders.
It's a massive statement.
Huge. He argues it's the only way to save the state from a total infrastructure and housing collapse. And look, we need to be crystal clear right up front. Geopolitics and U.S.-China relations are intensely charged, highly sensitive topics.
Okay.
Our goal today is strictly, 100%, not to endorse or condemn either side's political system or their geopolitical stance. We are absolutely not taking sides here.
Right. We are acting strictly as analytical guides to the text. We're here to rigorously examine the economic data Bhagat provides, dissect the construction mechanics he outlines, and look at the fascinating logistical arguments he presents.
Right.
He's making an argument for how mega projects are either successfully industrialized or fatally stalled. So we are staying firmly on the factory floor today and staying out of the political arena.
Exactly. So let's start with the fundamental unit of this entire premise, the ticket.
The ticket, yeah.
Because if the consumer math doesn't work, if nobody actually wants to ride the train, then pouring billions of dollars into concrete is utterly pointless.
Right. It's just an incredibly expensive monument at that point.
Exactly. So why does a traveler actually choose a train over an airplane when given a legitimate high-quality choice? Bhagat breaks this down using 2026 pricing data for Chinese transit.
And he categorizes the travel market into 3 distinct geographic tiers, which I think is a brilliant way to look at it.
Yeah, he doesn't just rely on the vague sentiment of, oh, well, trains are nicer.
Right. He proves exactly where they are economically superior and, just as importantly, where they objectively lose to airplanes.
Which is crucial.
So if we look at the extreme long haul, we're talking trips over 1,000 kilometers. Like the massive 2,300-kilometer route from Beijing to Guangzhou air travel. often wins on pure cost and time.
Yeah, the numbers on that are pretty stark. Like a second-class high-speed rail ticket for that Beijing to Guangzhou route runs somewhere between 862 to 1,036 RMB.
Right.
In US dollars, you're looking at roughly 125 to 150 bucks. And you are on that train for 8 to 11 hours.
That's a long time to be sitting, even on a nice train.
It is. But a heavily discounted economy flight, that might only cost 550 to 650 RMB. So $79 to $91, and you're in the air for maybe 3 hours.
So the flight is actually 30 to 45% cheaper if you book it strategically, and you save a massive amount of transit time.
Exactly. And Fagat notes that airlines are absolute masters of yield management.
Oh yeah, they have those algorithms dialed in perfectly.
Right. They can heavily discount these long routes off-peak, like between November and March, simply to fill seats that would otherwise fly completely empty.
Because the marginal cost of an extra passenger on a flight that's already scheduled across the country is virtually zero. I mean, it's just a few extra pounds of fuel.
Right. So for pure cost over 1,000 kilometers, the airplane definitely retains its crown.
But then the geometry changes completely.
It really does. Fagat looks at the second tier next, which is short trips under 500 kilometers. He uses Beijing to Tianjin as the example, which is about 130 kilometers. And here, the high-speed rail doesn't just compete. It completely obliterates the airline market.
Obliterates is the right word. I mean, the rail ticket costs just 50 to 70 RMB, so that's 7 to 10 US dollars. And the trip takes 30 to 40 minutes.
That's incredible.
Right. And if you try to fly that same route, assuming a commercial airline even bothers to service a route that short, it's going to cost you 650 RMB or more.
Wow.
So $90+. The train is 85 to 90% cheaper, and the airlines simply abandon these routes because they literally cannot economically compete.
Which brings us to the battleground. The third pier.
Ah, yes, the sweet spot.
The sweet spot. This is the distance between 500 and 1,000 kilometers. Fagat uses the Beijing to Zhangzhou route, which is 693 kilometers.
So a decent chunk of distance.
Yeah. The train takes 2.5 to 3 hours and costs around 43 to 54 US dollars. The absolute cheapest flight usually starts around $55, but frequently climbs up into the $70 or $80 range.
So the high-speed rail is 10 to 30% cheaper and vastly more convenient.
Yes. But what really fascinates me here is why these price differences are structurally locked in. Like, it's not just that airlines are being greedy on these routes, it's a completely different economic paradigm.
That's exactly right. Airlines operate on a model that is burdened by inescapable, massive fixed costs just to get the vehicle moving.
Right, before it even leaves the ground.
Before a plane even pushes back from the gate, the airline has already paid exorbitant airport landing fees, terminal gate rentals, baggage handling infrastructure costs.
A TSA and security taxes.
Yes, and the massive fuel burn required just to lift a metal tube to 30,000 feet. Because those base costs are so unbelievably high and so rigid, an airline cannot fundamentally offer a $50 flight without taking a loss.
Even if the flight is only going a few hundred miles.
Exactly. They have to pass those high fixed costs onto the consumer no matter what.
So airfares become highly volatile. They function almost like financial derivatives. You're sitting at your computer, opening up incognito tabs, wondering if the algorithm is going to punish you for booking on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday.
Oh, we've all been there. It's so stressful.
It is. But high-speed rail has a totally different DNA. Fagat points out that second-class high-speed rail fares in China are incredibly stable. They basically run a flat rate of about 0.45 to 0.55 RMB per kilometer.
And that predictable pricing fundamentally alters consumer psychology.
How so?
Well, when a transportation mode has a flat distance-based cost, it ceases to be something you have to strategize over. You don't set up Google flight alerts for a train.
Oh, that's a great point. You don't.
It transitions the public mind from a travel event,
Yeah.
a big ordeal, to a reliable public utility.
Yeah.
It's just always there, departing every 20 minutes, and you always know exactly what it will cost.
And it isn't just the financial cost, it's the taxation of your time.
Yes.
Fagat dives deep into what he calls door-to-door time dominance.
This is my favorite part of the analysis.
It's so relatable. Think about the last time you flew a short-haul route. Say, New York to D.C. or L.A. to San Francisco. A 90-minute flight is basically a spectacular illusion.
It is a 4 to 6 hour logistical ordeal completely disguised as a 90-minute convenience.
Exactly. You don't just magically teleport to the runway, you leave your house. You have to travel to an airport, which is almost inherently located on the far outskirts of the metropolitan area.
Because airports require thousands of acres of cheap land and clear flight paths. You can't put them downtown.
Right, so you're spending an hour in an Uber or taking a commuter train just to get to the property. Then you hit the 2-hour early arrival requirement.
Ugh, the waiting.
You navigate the security theater, you find the boarding zones, you do the agonizing wait while the plane pushes back, the taxiing.
And then, after the actual 90-minute flight, the process plays out all over again in reverse.
More taxiing.
More taxiing, waiting for a gate to open up because another plane is blocking it, deplaning, baggage claim, and then finding ground transportation at your destination just to fight traffic back into the city center where you actually wanted to do in the first place.
The contrast Pagat paints here is brilliant. Taking a high-speed train is like stepping onto a moving sidewalk between two downtowns.
A moving sidewalk. I love that analogy.
Right. The stations are embedded directly into the city centers. You take the local subway a few stops, you walk into a massive, airy terminal, you go through a friction light security scan, and you just board.
You were traveling downtown to downtown.
So even if the train's top speed is, say, 200 miles per hour compared to a jet's 500 miles per hour, the total journey time for the passenger is significantly shorter in that 500 to 1,000 kilometer sweet spot.
And this efficiency creates a vicious cycle for the airlines.
Really? How does that play out?
Because the high-speed rail captures so much of the passenger volume on these routes, airlines are forced to reduce their flight frequencies. They simply can't fill planes every hour anymore.
That makes sense.
And when flight frequencies drop, the train becomes exponentially more dominant because it still offers departures every 10 to 20 minutes.
Wow. So it just completely takes over.
It effectively erases domestic short-haul flying as a viable industry, and it replaces it with something vastly more efficient. It actually frees up airport gates for highly profitable international routes and drastically reduces domestic aviation carbon emissions in the process.
So if the math is so incredibly bulletproof for that 500 to 1,000 kilometer distance, we have to look at the ultimate 800-kilometer test case. San Francisco to Los Angeles.
The dream corridor.
On paper, this is the most perfect high-speed rail corridor on planet Earth. Two massive, incredibly wealthy economic engines separated by roughly 800 kilometers, currently suffocating under congested highways, and a deeply inefficient air corridor.
It really should be a triumph of modern engineering. But the reality of building that connection is where Pagat's piece transitions from an economic analysis into a stark autopsy of two vastly different construction philosophies.
Yeah, this is where things get grim.
We have to look at the staggering scale of China's success compared to California's legendary paralysis.
Let's lay out the data Pagat provides. By early 2026, China has built over 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail.
50,000. It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
It is. They built a network larger than the rest of the world's high-speed rail networks combined, stitching together nearly every major metropolis in a nation of over 1 billion people.
And they're doing this at an estimated cost of $17 to $28 million per kilometer. Major lines go from groundbreaking to actually moving passengers in 3 to 5 years.
Now, pivot to California. The voters approved the High-Speed Rail Act way back in 2008. Proposition 1A.
Right, I remember that.
The original promise was a flagship line linking San Francisco and Los Angeles, completed by 2020 for roughly $33 billion.
And here we are looking at the 2026 data. The estimated cost for just the starter segment, which is a 171-mile stretch in the Central Valley from Merced to Bakersfield, is now sitting at $34.796 billion.
Wait, hold on. $34 billion for just that one short segment.
Yep. If you run the math on that, it is roughly $126 million per kilometer.
Compare that to China's 17 to 28 million. That is insane.
And what do they have to show for it? They've completed nearly 80 miles of guideway and 60 major structures. But there is zero track laid, there are no electrical systems, and there are exactly zero trains.
So 18 years after voters authorized the project, they have essentially built a series of disconnected concrete monuments in the desert.
That's exactly what it is. The total projection for the full SF to LA route is now hovering around $126 billion, with completion dates sliding vaguely into the late 2030s or 2040s.
How does this happen? I mean, how can one nation build 50,000 kilometers seamlessly while one of the wealthiest states in the world struggles for 2 decades to build a few dozen miles of empty viaducts.
Fagat argues it's not simply a matter of cheaper labor or raw materials over there, it's a fundamental divergence in philosophy.
What's the core difference?
He writes this incredible line: China builds high-speed rail like an industrial product. California builds high-speed rail like a bespoke legal process.
A bespoke legal process.
Yeah.
That phrase completely reorients how you view the California High-Speed Rail Authority.
It really does. If you look at them not as a construction company, but as a massive legal compliance and litigation firm that occasionally pours concrete, the 18-year delay suddenly makes perfect, horrifying sense.
Fagat describes the California approach as friction piled on friction. Instead of a unified top-down execution, you have this heavily fragmented contracting.
Right.
The state breaks the route into smaller segments and hands them to multiple different prime contractors. This inherently creates massive interface risks.
Oh, totally. Because if contractor A builds their segment slightly differently or faces a delay, contractor B now has a legitimate claim to sue for a change order.
Exactly. Because their timelines and designs are disrupted by the first guy.
And layered on top of that contracting nightmare is the multi-agency permitting process and the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA.
Ah, CQA.
Bagat points out how these mechanisms, originally designed to protect communities, have been weaponized. Local municipalities, wealthy NIBY enclaves, competing interest groups, they all use the environmental review process to file endless lawsuits.
They aren't actually trying to improve the environmental impact, are they?
Not usually, no. They are using the sheer cost and time of litigation to bleed the project to death, forcing endless redesigns and route alterations.
It's like comparing a highly optimized factory assembly line to a group of monks trying to build a handcrafted cathedral, except the monks have to spend 15 years in court arguing with the neighboring village over the blueprints.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Aren't these strict environmental reviews and community consultation periods necessary? I mean, we know the catastrophic damage mid-century highway projects did when they just bulldozed lower-income neighborhoods without a second thought. Are we really saying these legal protections are inherently bad?
That is the exact philosophical tension Fagat targets in the piece. He fully acknowledges that these systems were designed with noble intentions to prevent harm.
Right.
But he identifies a devastating paradox. A system designed to flawlessly prevent harm through endless granular review eventually prevents the project's completion entirely.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And preventing the completion of a massive green electrified public transit system creates a new, vastly larger kind of harm.
The harm of permanent dysfunction.
Exactly.
By stalling the clean train in court for 2 decades over highly localized impacts, you are effectively mandating that millions of people continue driving gas-powered cars on congested highways, emitting millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. The pursuit of a flawless, perfectly mitigated process guarantees a comprehensively failed outcome.
Fagat frames it as a brutal societal choice. Do you prioritize the purity of the legal and consultative process, ensuring every single stakeholder has a veto? Or do you prioritize the physical delivery of the infrastructure that benefits the macro environment and the broader population?
And right now, California's ecosystem is optimized for processing lawsuits and change orders. China's ecosystem is optimized for pouring concrete and moving passengers.
Oh, exactly.
But all this debate over poured concrete, CEQA lawsuits, and construction timelines, it actually misses the true prize.
Yeah, we're burying the lead a bit here.
We are, because the people who are desperate for this train to exist aren't advocating for it out of a deep love for civil engineering.
No, definitely not.
They're advocating for it because they literally cannot afford to live in the cities where they work. Fagat argues this isn't actually a story about transportation at all. It's a story about the economic geography of a state tearing itself apart over the cost of living.
It's a story about real estate.
Yeah.
And specifically, the concept of the labor market radius.
Let's look at the stark housing contrast Bagat highlights from early 2026.
Okay, lay it out.
If you want to buy a median-priced home in Santa Clara County, the beating heart of Silicon Valley or up the peninsula in San Francisco, you are looking at an entry price of $1.8 to $2 million.
It's basically a gated economic fortress at this point.
It is. But if you look inland, across the Diablo Range into the Central Valley to cities like Fresno, The median home price is hovering around $380,000 to $430,000.
It is less than a quarter of the price.
And the physical distance between San Jose and Fresno is only about 150 miles. But the economic distance is an absolute chasm.
Because currently, trying to bridge that chasm is a waking nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
If you buy that affordable home in Fresno but keep your tech job in San Jose, you are signing up for a 3+ hour driving commute each way. And that's assuming perfect traffic conditions, which literally never exist.
Never. You are spending 6 to 7 hours of your day staring at taillights on the 152.
It destroys your health, your family life, your productivity. So Fresno remains practically, quote-unquote, far away.
But distance isn't really measured in miles, it's measured in time.
Exactly.
The labor market radius, the distance people are realistically willing to travel daily for work, usually maxes out around an hour or an hour and a half. What happens when you introduce a bullet train traveling at 220 miles per hour?
That grueling 3-hour drive shrinks to a comfortable 45 to 60-minute train ride.
Yes. You can drink a coffee, open your laptop, clear your inbox, and actually arrive at work relaxed.
High-speed rail essentially warps the map. It expands the labor market radius of the coastal job centers hundreds of miles inland. It turns distant, geographically isolated agricultural towns into highly viable, deeply attractive bedroom communities.
It practically mints new land. You can't magically manufacture 1 million new acres of buildable real estate on the San Francisco Peninsula. The geography and the zoning just won't allow it.
Right, there's nowhere to build.
But by drastically reducing the transit time, the train effectively brings the massive, affordable inland housing supply directly into the coastal labor market.
And Pagat points out that this isn't some theoretical economic model. This is precisely how China has used its high-speed rail network over the last decade.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't just build trains to connect existing wealthy cities. They used the network to fundamentally reshape national geography. Inland cities that were once considered economic backwaters are now thriving, dynamic commuter zones for the coastal megaregions.
So the train relieved localized housing pressure by spreading the demand over a vastly larger, highly connected geographic area.
Exactly. Think about what that does to a city like Fresno. It becomes Silicon Valley South.
Silicon Valley South.
And it doesn't happen because a massive tech conglomerate suddenly decides to build a new campus in the Central Valley out of charity. It happens organically because middle-class workers, the mid-level engineers, the HR directors, the public school teachers who work on the coast can finally afford space. They can afford the stability and dignity of homeownership while retaining their Tier 1 coastal salaries.
And when those workers move inland, they bring their coastal incomes with them.
Yes, that's the multiplier effect.
That capital spurs local retail, services, restaurant scenes, and eventually localized innovation and secondary business hubs.
It decentralizes economic activity without sacrificing the dense productivity of the major coastal hubs. Federal and state policymakers have spent decades trying to force this kind of geographically balanced growth through convoluted tax subsidies and zoning tweaks, with almost zero success.
And a fast train achieves it almost overnight.
It redefines the very concept of a suburb. The suburb is no longer the cul-de-sac 15 miles down the clogged highway. It's the vibrant, mid-sized city 150 miles down the rail line.
But because California has failed to deliver the physical infrastructure, they have failed to unlock this housing revolution. The state continues to hemorrhage middle-class families who simply give up, pack their bags, and move to Texas or Nevada because the geographic trap remains firmly shut.
Which turns the bureaucratic failure of the rail authority from a political punchline into a massive human tragedy. Millions of people are permanently priced out of the middle-class dream simply because the state cannot figure out how to pour concrete in a straight line.
So if the stakes are this high, if the payoff is literally solving the housing crisis and saving the middle class, how do you actually build it? Because clearly the bespoke legal process isn't working.
Not at all.
To understand the solution, Pagat forces us to look closely at the actual engineering mechanics on the factory floor. We have to understand how a mega project is constructed when it actually works.
And he provides a fascinating masterclass in construction methodologies. Let's look at how China approaches the physical act of building the viaducts, those elevated concrete bridges the trains run on.
Okay.
The defining characteristic is radical standardization.
Right. Pagat details the use of precast box girders. These are massive, hollow concrete tubes that form the track bed. Instead of designing a custom bridge for every single mile of the route, they use standard lengths, almost universally 24 or 32 meters long. But it's not just the shape, it's how they manufacture them that bypasses so much friction.
In a traditional Western build, you might pour concrete right on site. You're building wooden forms up in the air, dealing with local traffic closures, weather delays, and all the ground-level logistics for every single pier and span.
Which takes forever.
Right. China bypasses this entirely by setting up what Magat calls beam yards. These are essentially temporary, highly mechanized concrete factories built directly alongside the proposed rail route.
Instead of trucking in custom components from hundreds of miles away, these yards just churn out thousands of identical pre-stressed concrete segments in a controlled factory environment right next to the installation site.
Exactly. And then they deploy the true game changer, the launching gantry.
Okay, wait. A launching gantry. What exactly is that?
The launching gantry is a massive, specialized piece of heavy machinery that operates entirely in the air. It rests on top of the concrete piers that have already been built.
So it's not even on the ground.
Nope. It picks up a 900-ton concrete box girder from the beam yard, rolls forward over the empty space to the next pier, and lowers the girder into place. Then it rolls forward onto the newly placed girder and just repeats the process.
It's mesmerizing engineering. Because the gantry operates above the ground, it largely ignores the chaotic friction below.
Yes.
It doesn't care if it's crossing a river, a busy highway, or rugged terrain. You have one team continuously boring the deep foundations, a second team immediately following to cast the vertical piers, the beam yard continuously feeding the girders, and the gantry laying the track bed in the sky.
It's a relentless, forward-moving pipeline, basically an assembly line stretched across the landscape.
And this mechanical efficiency is only possible because of the organizational structure. Vagat highlights the sheer power of vertical integration.
This is key. In China, massive state-owned enterprises, like the China Railway Construction Corporation, CRCC, and the China Railway Engineering Corporation, CREC, they control the entire life cycle of the project.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. The same entity handles the initial geological survey, the engineering design, the procurement of raw materials, and the physical construction.
So they operate as a single organism.
Exactly.
The design department feeds the procurement department, which feeds the construction teams. If a problem arises, it's solved internally. Contrast that with California's fragmented relay race, where every prime contractor is a separate corporate entity.
With its own lawyers, its own margins to protect, and its own incentive to blame the other guys for delays.
Right. If the California State Authority demands a slight design change because of an environmental review, Contractor A has to pause work, renegotiate their contract, which delays Contractor B, who then sues Contractor C for holding up their specialized crews.
Vagat makes a really profound point here regarding innovation. China did not invent high-speed rail.
Right, Japan did.
Right, Japan pioneered it in the 1960s with the Shinkansen, and Europe refined it with the French TGV and the German ICE networks. China's genius wasn't inventing the train, it was industrializing the delivery of the track.
They figured out how to mass-produce custom infrastructure.
When they encountered a geographic obstacle or a dense urban environment, they didn't treat it as a reason to pause the project for a decade to conduct studies. They treated it as a scheduling problem to be solved by throwing overwhelming centralized logistical power at it.
Meanwhile, California is attempting to build the most complex megaproject in its history using an ecosystem optimized for litigation.
Yeah.
The system is literally designed to process change orders, not to lay track. And we haven't even touched on the funding mechanism, which acts as a massive accelerant to the delays.
Oh, the funding is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Infrastructure construction despises uncertainty. You need a massive, continuous flow of capital to keep an army of engineers and heavy machinery operating.
But California funds the high-speed rail project through a volatile mix of unpredictable annual state budget fights, fluctuating cap-and-trade auction revenues, and shifting federal grants tied to which political party currently holds power in Washington.
So you get these brutal stop-start cycles.
Explain how that works on the ground.
Well,
Yeah?
the authority gets $1 billion, right? So they mobilize massive construction crews, build out the beam yards, and start making real progress.
Okay.
Then the funding gets tied up in a political battle. So they have to demobilize the crews, secure the sites, and wait. 3 years later, they get more money and have to rehire and remobilize everyone.
That's agonizing.
Starting and stopping a massive industrial engine is the fastest way to absolutely hemorrhage billions of dollars with nothing to show for it.
California is caught in a massive sunk cost trap. The sunk cost fallacy dictates that we irrationally continue to invest in a failing endeavor simply because we've already poured resources into it.
Right.
Forgot argues that California's political class is looking at the $14 billion already spent on those isolated viaducts in the Central Valley and treating it as precious equity they need to protect.
They feel they have to let the current contractors finish the job using the current broken process just to justify the money already spent.
We've already paid the tuition, so we can't drop out of the class, even though the class is teaching them nothing.
Exactly. But Fagat says that money is gone. It's not a bargaining chip. It's just the incredibly steep price California paid to definitively prove that its current procurement and construction model cannot physically deliver a high-speed rail line.
The rational move, once you realize your methodology is fatally flawed, is not to protect the pride of the process. It is to radically pivot to a model that actually guarantees an outcome.
Which brings us to Bagat's wildly provocative, deeply controversial conclusion. Here we go. If California is trapped in a legally paralyzed, budget-bleeding nightmare, how do they escape? He proposes a solution that, especially in the geopolitical climate of 2026, takes incredible nerve to even publish.
His solution is unapologetically blunt. He argues that California should hand the remaining construction and systems integration over to the Chinese state builders firms like CRCC to actually finish the job. His exact phrasing is, "Sunk costs be damned."
Handing the crown jewel of American state infrastructure to a geopolitical rival, it is politically radioactive.
Oh, totally. The immediate reaction from any lawmaker would be a hard, reflexive no.
Absolutely.
But Fogat isn't writing from a place of political ideology. He is writing from a place of ruthless, desperate pragmatism. His singular goal is getting operational trains running at 220 miles per hour to unlock that housing revolution.
And he doesn't just throw the idea out as a chid provocation. He meticulously outlines how this could actually work without compromising national security or surrendering sovereignty.
Okay, break that down for me. How does he structure it?
He suggests structuring the engagement through fixed-price turnkey contracts. You bring in the international consortiums and you establish absolute parameters. Here is the finalized route. Here is the fixed price we will pay. Here is the non-negotiable hard deadline for completion.
And you back it up with what?
Devastating financial penalties for any delays, all while establishing rigorous, independent American auditing firms to constantly inspect the concrete and steel quality.
He also addresses the economic concern regarding domestic jobs. He suggests mandating joint ventures with American union labor.
Right, which is huge for the political sale.
Exactly. The Chinese firms provide the top-level industrial management, the standardized templates, the massive launching gantries, and the scale coordination. But they partner directly with local California labor unions to actually execute the physical work where appropriate.
You import the management philosophy and the specialized machinery, but you employ the local workforce.
But the most brilliant element of his proposal, the part that actually makes it viable, is his security workaround.
Yes. Because obviously, the national security concerns regarding Chinese involvement in American critical infrastructure are deeply valid.
Very valid.
You absolutely cannot have a foreign adversary possessing backdoor access to the communications, signaling, or power grids of a major transportation network. A cyber attack could cripple the system or literally derail trains.
Vaga acknowledges this threat completely and proposes a strict firewall. He argues that we must separate the civil construction from the operational control systems.
Let them build the bones, but keep the nervous system entirely American.
Yes, it's like buying a ridiculously fast, high-performance computer motherboard and processor from overseas, but insisting on wiping the hard drive and installing your own custom-built, highly secure operating system before you ever plug it into the internet.
Precisely. Let the Chinese consortiums do what they have proven they do better than anyone else on Earth. Pour the concrete, build the viaducts, bore the tunnels through the mountains, and lay the physical steel track. They are the undisputed masters of heavy civil engineering.
But when it comes to the signaling networks, the positive train control software, the SCADA systems managing the electrical grid, the station security, and the communications infrastructure, you carve all of that out.
You reserve those specific contracts exclusively for tightly vetted, highly secure American or allied defense and technology firms.
Exactly. The physical track has no idea what software is running on it. You get the staggering speed and cost efficiency of the hardware delivery, but you maintain absolute, uncompromised sovereign control over the data and operations.
It's a highly pragmatic compromise. And it's not unprecedented. Global mega projects frequently utilize international consortiums to leverage specialized expertise while protecting sensitive local domains.
Yeah.
The barrier here isn't technological, it's purely psychological and political.
And that leads to the ultimate pushback. What about the sheer political humiliation? We are talking about the United States of America, the country that built the Hoover Dam, constructed the interstate highway system, and put a man on the moon. What does it mean to admit on the world stage that we literally cannot build a rail line across a flat valley without calling in a foreign power to bail us out?
Vagat addresses this head-on with a line that cuts right to the bone. He writes, "Humiliation is cheaper than failure."
Humiliation is cheaper than failure. It hurts, but it's true.
He argues that California has already paid tens of billions of dollars for embarrassment. The rest of the world, Europe, Japan, China, is already watching this project flounder.
Right.
To protect the current bespoke legal process out of national pride doesn't save face. It just guarantees the project's slow, agonizing death.
And it won't be a dramatic death. It won't explode. It will just die by bureaucratic silence.
Exactly.
The funding will slowly dry up. The public will completely lose interest. The politicians will stop mentioning it in speeches. And what you'll be left with is a modern-day pyramid of useless, weathering concrete stretching across the Central Valley.
Proof that vast sums of money were spent, but not proof that any actual progress occurred.
Fagat forces a binary choice. The choice isn't between finishing it ourselves perfectly or having China finish it, because finishing it ourselves perfectly is no longer on the menu.
Right, that ship has sailed.
The actual choice is between having a functioning transformative train built by a pragmatic international partnership or having no train at all and remaining permanently trapped in a suffocating housing and traffic nightmare.
If they can just get that starter segment between Merced and Bakersfield running quickly and flawlessly, using this imported industrial expertise, it acts as a spark plug.
How so?
The public finally rides it, they feel the speed, they experience the convenience, it proves the system works, it generates actual ticket revenue, and it builds unstoppable political momentum to push through the difficult mountain passes and finish the rest of the line to San Francisco and LA.
It's a plea for a results-first reset. Stop debating the purity of the process and start delivering the physical product. Because pride is not a viable transportation strategy.
That's incredibly well said.
Which brings us to the broader implications of this entire deep dive. We've traveled from the granular minutia of airline yield management and ticket pricing through the macroeconomics of spatial mismatch and housing markets and deep into the geopolitical realities of mega project construction.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We really have. And when you step back and view the entire tapestry Bhagat has woven, the core message is incredibly potent.
That 800-kilometer stretch between San Francisco and Los Angeles isn't just a transit corridor. It's the perfect canvas for redefining the American social contract.
Yes, high-speed rail in this specific context transcends moving people from point A to point B. It is a profound physical tool for reshaping land values, redistributing locked-up coastal wealth to neglected inland regions, and giving the working and middle classes a legitimate chance at homeownership and a dignified quality of life.
It forces a society to look in the mirror and decide what it actually values. Do we prefer the cozy comfort of permanent legal debate, procedural purity, and endless environmental reviews that change nothing?
Or do we prefer the difficult, messy, but ultimately functional reality of actually building infrastructure that improves human lives?
It is a profound challenge to the institutional status quo that has paralyzed infrastructure development across the entire Western world.
Think about your own community for a second. Look around your own city, your own county, or your own state. Are there local projects, maybe a desperately needed high-density, affordable housing development, a new subway expansion, a desalination plant, or a massive offshore wind farm that are suffering from this exact same disease?
Projects drowning in friction, piled on friction.
How often in our society do we let the perfect, heavily litigated ideal become the absolute enemy of the built reality?
It's a systemic pattern. We see it in housing, we see it in energy grids, we see it in transit. We have mastered the art of stopping things from happening.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought to mull over. If we have truly reached a point in modern history where our society's staggering technological capability is vastly outmatched by our bureaucratic inability to actually deploy that technology, What happens when we face the next generation of existential mega challenges?
That is the defining core of the next 50 years.
If we literally cannot pour concrete in a straight line across an empty agricultural valley without a 15-year delay, endless lawsuits, and $100 billion in overruns, how on earth are we going to build the massive continent-spanning infrastructure required to survive the climate crisis of the coming century?
It's a terrifying thought.
We are going to need thousands of miles of new, resilient power grids. We are going to need massive clean energy installations, continent-wide charging networks, and towering seawalls to protect our coastal cities. If our fundamental process for building is broken at the relatively simple level of a passenger rail line, how do we survive the brutal, unforgiving tests of the future?
It strongly suggests that the most critical, urgent invention we need right now isn't a better battery, a more efficient solar panel, or a faster train. We already have those. The invention we need is a better, more ruthless bureaucracy capable of executing on them.
We need the courage to build again. So returning to where we started, imagine that beautiful $400,000 house in Fresno.
The dream.
Imagine keeping the high-paying job in Silicon Valley. Imagine the relaxed 45-minute, 220-mile-per-hour commute reading a book while the landscape blurs past. The economic math works perfectly. The engineering technology already exists and is deployed globally. The only thing standing in the way of that reality is us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.